the CEO view from the front of the pack, the state of crypto, and how brands will embrace the sector from here. I'm joined by Michele Levine from Special Counsel from the Fold Legal and Yoni Assia, founder and CEO of eToro for Blockchain Week 2022. Take the stage, guys.
Thank you so much. Yoni, it's an absolute pleasure, honor, and thrill to introduce you. Yoni is the CEO and co-founder of eToro, the world's leading social trading platform, and it provides users with lots of tools to create wonderful portfolios of crypto, stocks, commodities, ETFs, CFDs, and more. Geez, it's a mouthful. So Yoni, we're really going to take this opportunity to explore how brands can and will embrace the crypto sector and who's going to lead the charge. So let me just kick off with the first question. eToro was an early mover on crypto and so has a really unique understanding of the industry's trajectory to date. Looking at the current state of crypto, what do you think the future state is going to be in the next few years?
So it has been an exciting ride the last 11 years, a bit more, since we discovered Bitcoin for the first time. And when we started looking at it, I've always compared my initial reaction to Bitcoin to my initial reaction to the stock markets and capital markets, and to my initial reaction to the internet. And that it connects everybody around the world, in this case, into the internet of value. And I think that the future in this case is evolving very fast and is inevitable. And the future is most assets in the world will become digital native. And we're just in the very early stages of that process. Crypto markets today are at $1.9 trillion market cap, but the equity and debt markets plus real estate are at north of $300 trillion. So when we think of the next 10 years, we can think of a process that's gradually digitizing the entire financial services ecosystem, and that is going to be the largest transfer of wealth in human history from a technology point of view. And at the same time, we will see emerging new, basically, technologies, products, which I think quite interestingly right now are manifested through apes and through NFTs, but basically a new type of dialogue and products of people to converse through value over the internet. New groups emerging in the metaverse, connecting to one another and creating new types of products, bringing in, and what we're seeing right now is suddenly new entrants into the space, whether you look at the people who buy apes, like people from Hollywood or NBA players and sports teams and members, or whether it's the fact that Nike and Adidas and Puma are getting into the metaverse, as well as almost every single consumer brand right now is starting to embrace crypto and exploring blockchain technology and how they can use it for their own, basically, network effects for their own communities. So I think those two in parallel, one is the emergence of blockchain as the basis of new financial services, and second is the emergence of new products and how brands can embrace these new products to connect their global communities, I think will significantly change and create a paradigm shift in how we converse value over the internet over the next 10 years.
That's really interesting. Can I just ask a follow-up question on that? Because it always wonders. Brands obviously have goodwill, right? That's what they trade, that's what they do, that's their value. How do you transfer that goodwill and that brand recognition into a new environment, which A, you're not native to, B, you haven't been operating in, and C, it is constantly evolving and growing at such a rapid rate? How does a brand do that?
Well, I think it's a challenge of every company to constantly adopt to new technologies. Just as an example, when we started eToro back in 2007, we were a desktop app that tried to simply simplify finance. When social networks emerged, and this was 2007, 8, 9, we saw the power of social networking. We transformed eToro into a social investment network, a social network for investors to collaborate. When we saw Bitcoin emerging back in 2011, we bought Bitcoin and then added Bitcoin into the platform. When we saw the shift from mobile, we had to push everybody to mobile. Now when we're seeing Web3 and non-custodial wallets and opportunities of browsing through the Web3 assets of the world, we need to strategize and shift around how do we move from CeFi to DeFi for our users. And that's the example of eToro from my seat as CEO. The world is constantly changing and companies need to innovate or die. Companies need to adapt. I think when we're thinking of this new digital world, and I'll sort of walk through the different stages that we've seen across the last 11 years. We've seen Bitcoin emerge, new digital gold with a lot of skepticism around it. Then we were very early on into the concept of tokenization of assets with colored coins, with Vitalik participating back in 2012 and 13 about the opportunity of blockchain as blockchain, and not only Bitcoin as digital gold, but blockchain as blockchain. And then Ethereum emerged out of that and created smart contracts. Then we saw the emergence of new tokens, of ICOs, IDOs, IOs. Then we saw what we call today DeFi, which is financial services out of the future. Like if you work today in a bank and you look at DeFi, it's like looking at 2050. And then gradually now we're seeing the shift towards more consumer brands with NFTs, which suddenly are more tangible. So more people can relate to NFTs, to art, than they can to a general token economics, things that are more complex by nature and more financial nature. So NFTs create that connection into consumers, and they create also communities into the metaverse, right? So gradually we've building an economy that's a global economy that fits a global community of people, right, of billions, that converse not only with text, but they converse also through the exchange of value, which has become much simpler. Now brands, and I think that's something really beautiful that we've seen last year, have really understood that their real value is not necessarily creating, especially big brands from physical products, right? When you think of Nike and Adidas and Puma, just from the shoes industry, and I really can go industry by industry, I think the realization is I can sell in Australia 10 million shoes a year, but I can sell 100 million digital shoes. What are those digital shoes that I can sell? I think it's about artists, musicians realizing I can walk through sort of the traditional Apple Music or Spotify, but what if I connect with my community through an NFT of my music? What if they have tokens that are part of participating in my fan base? And I think gradually what we're seeing right now is culture sort of catching up into this beautiful world of DeFi and blockchain. And that is eventually going to bring every single company in the world to a process of accelerated digital transformation, which is now not only about transforming digitally your company into the internet so people can interact with your brand, but it's creating new type of products that are digitally native and are digitally exchangeable.
And I think on top of that, I've really been thinking about it. It's that experiential component of it too. And it's that engaging with the product more than just from a commoditized point of view. And I think that's where the real value from a brand can happen once it starts borrowing into the space that you're talking about. It adds that multi-layer experiential point of view. So we've been talking about some industries at the minute. We're talking about kicks, which are my absolute favorite. I can't go past a pair of Air Jordans. I love them. My husband hates them. But what other industry sectors do you really see being ripe for change and really being able to maximize the opportunity of the space when it comes to brand and crypto?
I think, again, surprisingly enough, I always find this quote from Elon Musk very entertaining when he talked about Dogecoin, which I think was a surprise for a lot of crypto people, a lot of sort of people coming sort of from the background of Bitcoin and Ethereum and sort of, the power of technology, looking at the rise of Dogecoin. And he said that sometimes, the most entertaining outcome is actually the plausible one. And what I find very interesting is it's much harder when I've looked at the last 10 years, and it's probably the same for both the internet. If I'm looking at sort of my younger self when I was 16, 15, finding the internet, or roughly 20 years later, finding out the blockchain and crypto, is that you look at this technology and the obvious things that needs to change is financial services, right? The financial services industry is broken, it's fragmented, it is built out of sort of pockets of black holes and sort of vagueness of how things work. And you look at things that are inevitable, like central bank digital currency, like the digitization. I think ASX in Australia are doing a good progress towards using blockchain to power the stock exchange. And I think those are obvious changes, but these obvious changes are going to take the longest. And the reason they're going to take the longest is because there is an existing infrastructure that, even though it doesn't work perfectly, it's not 24/7 and it's not global, it works and it has a lot of people working on top of it. And it's going to be very hard to make the move. And it's the same with art and NFTs. If you look at the traditional art world, it makes sense for every piece of art in the world to be represented as also an NFT that represents ownership of that digital art. But when you look at what happened last year, and I think that's also true if we think of 2017 and ICOs and IDOs, real change and real disruption comes externally from the places you expect the least, because you don't have any sort of guardians trying to protect that space and trying to create stability and sort of maintain the status quo. So suddenly you see things like punks and apes running in the metaverse. You see Sandbox. You see things like DeFi, like Aave and Compound and others, which were unexpected. So I think what, from my view of the industry, is the change and disruption that we're going to see is probably going to come first from the unexpected places and then gradually disrupt the very expected and inevitable places.
So you really see the greenfield sites, the sites that aren't really established, don't have the infrastructure, don't have the personnel, don't have the systems, new field sites being the real impetus towards change, and it will sort of ricochet through to the more established industries that probably need it more. Yeah.
I think that's how usually disruption works. It comes from simply unexpected places.
And do you think the change is going to be led mostly by new entrants or people who are already established in the crypto space, or a combination or partnerships? Do you see that being a big play when it comes to brands taking on crypto?
I definitely see there's a huge play for brands taking crypto right now. So again, when thinking about the metaverse, and there's different definitions of the metaverse. So I'll use my definition, which is basically the collection of communities on the internet that create what historically was local communities. If you think about the past, we had local villages all around the world, and then we had to invent as humanity, gold, to create a way for all of those villages to effectively communicate and exchange value. And that flattened the world into sort of one string of value. For the last 5,000 years, all of those communities could only communicate through sort of the value of gold, of fiat, of currency. And suddenly now we see communities emerging, creating different sets of values. And those pockets of communities together represent just a different sort of map of the world in potential. And I think that brands will have, like big brands, will have to embrace that and are embracing it, because it's moving from local into global, which is why big brands that have a large global presence are looking at the metaverse, at a way to access new communities. And they're asking themselves, how can we connect and tap into those communities? And those brands come from, again, from sports, from music, from luxury brands to consumer brands to retail brands. So, and eventually every type of brand will need their presence in the metaverse, and to find their presence in the metaverse. And a great way to evaluate your presence in the metaverse is going to be, what is the value of my NFTs? How many digital transactions am I seeing in the metaverse? So if you think of digital transformation sort of 1.0, or you can look at 1.0 and 2.0, which is sort of the static web towards the mobile dynamic web. One was measured by eyeballs. How many people come to my website? The second was monthly active users on the mobile phone or installs. In the same way, we're going to see every single company in the world eventually measuring itself in how many people communicate with me through a blockchain, right? So it's, when I worked with several companies on digital transformation, I was surprised that traditional finance companies, even today, are not necessarily measuring sort of monthly active users on the mobile phone, or number of visitors on the web, how many people log in through the web to my web app. And that's just another step of that, is most companies in the world will start measuring how many users interact with us through blockchain technology, through smart contracts.
It's really interesting. Do you think crypto expansion will need to be consumer-led? And how critical do you think sponsorships and partnerships are going to be to achieving that?
I do think it's going to be consumer-led for a while. And I think it's going to be consumer-led because it's extremely disruptive and actually much easier for consumers to adopt than for institutions to adopt. And I'll just give an example, which is, by definition, smart contracts enable you to interact with people and transact financial transactions without accounting and lawyers. For regular people, that's great because it's faster, it's easier, it's immediate. But for financial institutions, or for generally for companies, they're like, wait, I understand we're doing this transaction in a smart contract. How do we also write a legal contract for it? Bring me lawyers to explain to me what's happening here. And then they need to go to their accountants and ask them, hey, we did this transaction. How do we account for this in the books in the traditional accounting way? So it's going to be harder by definition for institutions to come in. And I think it's also a bigger part of what we started in eToro back in 2007 with the vision of opening the global markets for consumers around the world to trade and invest in a simple and transparent way. We believe in the consumerization of finance. If you think about finance today, the majority of wealth in the world is held by gatekeepers that somebody gave them your money, right? So you give your money to, it's pension fund, it's a superannuation, somebody else makes a decision, they move the money around, and eventually it sits in this pile of $1 trillion of asset managers that make decisions very far from where you originated the money that you generated. And crypto changes that significantly. Crypto moves the power into the consumers, but also in general, if you look at Gen Y and Gen Z, they want to take more of that control to themselves. So at the same time, we talked about the generational transformation, the transformation of wealth from a technology point of view, of blockchain, of moving most assets in the world into a digital native economy, right? So looking at the $200 trillion moving from traditional databases, non-24/7, very local, into a global economy. At the same time, there's another shift, which is this shift from sort of B2B into consumers, right? Gen Y and Gen Z, which is now a generational transformation of wealth. These $200 trillion are also going to move from older generations to newer generations, are going to have a very different mindset and expectations of how to use their money. So those two changes in parallel are actually moving together, moving money from older generations to newer generations through both consumer-led technology and on the back end. And every single entity that wants to enjoy that huge transformation of wealth is going to be a part of that. Again, whether you're talking about brands, sports team, TV, any type of entertainment channel is going to connect into that huge transition of wealth.
I'll let you get your earphone. I just dropped out. Given your experience, because you've launched many innovative solutions, what advice would you give to brands and businesses that are trying to navigate and grow the industry now? They're not crypto native, they're not digital native, but they do want to start playing and they do want to start transitioning to this new world.
First, experiment. I believe in experimentation. We at eToro bought various types of crypto assets along the years. We bought Bitcoin in 2011 for $5. We launched Ethereum on the platform. It was $4. We started trading NFTs last year, various metaverses. I think having in your company people who can experiment with the technology and come up with crazy ideas is a requirement to manage this. So if you're a brand, if you're a company, you need a crazy 21-year-old Gen Z playing with NFTs, the metaverse, and crypto, and throwing ideas and darts on the wall. So that's the first thing, is you have to experiment with the technology to understand it. I would advise every CEO to open Web3 accounts, to understand crypto, to hold crypto, to transact with smart contracts, to understand what is the potential impact for their business. Second, again, it really depends on which type of brands, right? So in my view, most brands, most consumer brands, retail brands already have a high level, a very large community following them. Engaging with that community over blockchain, again, is something that purely from sort of a KPI perspective is something that I think needs to be measured. How many of my consumers are interacting with me on the blockchain, and what does that mean? But I don't think I can generalize for all brands, except saying if you're selling today a physical product, you should ask yourself, what is the manifestation of that physical product? What am I bringing to the world? What's the value I'm bringing to the world through that physical product? And how can I translate that into a digital product? And how can I start experimenting, selling digital products, whether it's digital shoes, whether it's stores of wine or guitars? How do I make that transformation into digital products that are exchangeable over the internet? Because that is one of the greatest things that I think we've seen with NFTs last year, is if you generate a product that is a digital product, instead of making money by selling it once, you can actually make money every time it changes hands. And that is a huge value of this ecosystem is maintaining that continuous flow of revenues?
I think just from the little that I see and know, just with brands just generally, and also the NFT space, and I think scarcity and uniqueness is going to be really key. If you think about some of the designer handbags out there, like the designer handbag market has gone bananas. It is a very lucrative industry at the moment, just even selling second. But if you can create that concept, it's odd, right? Like, like only 200 of a Chanel bag might get generated, and so that scarcity creates that value. And I feel like that sort of that value and that scarcity when it comes to brands and brand recognition is going to be important as well when we're looking at the metaverse and moving into this Web3 space. I think people like to be exclusive and like to have those things, and I can see how that can sort of play out. What do you think we as industry can do to sort of help transition brands and steward them into the process? Do you think there's a role to play?
Definitely. I think one of the reasons we're excited about the NFT world is the opportunity for us to work with brands, to work with companies, to bring them into the world of trading and investing. As you mentioned, handbags. I would love customers in eToro to potentially invest in Chanel handbags. Maybe that's a good investment.
I'm telling you, there's something there.
But maybe Louis Vuitton ones.
Any of them.
But I think it's really about companies like eToro and a lot of the crypto companies want to see more products that are exchangeable, because our business is helping people find the value in exchangeable products, right? And the decentralized world or the metaverse creates that world where suddenly those handbags can sit on the blockchain in the cloud and people can transact with them. And I think for us, we work with we sponsor sports teams and players and events, but I think now suddenly that will transform into something that has a product element into it, and I think that's a very big opportunity of companies like eToro or any brand to work with companies like eToro to help figure out what is their digital strategy. I think, and we see it across the board. We do work with a lot of companies. I can't share a bit of our plans in the metaverse yet, but you'll see it soon. But how companies like eToro can help brands that are coming from out of the industry sort of jump into the metaverse. And I think we've seen a lot of that, just as an example, in the sandbox. You open the sandbox and you look at the variety of brands there, just you look at the map in the sandbox, and I think that's a great example of how brands can embrace sort of the ecosystem or some land in the metaverse. So
you obviously are working on things that you can't share yet. Is there anything that you can share today in terms of what you're looking most forward to doing in this brand space? Like, obviously, anything you can share would be most grateful.
I think we're very keen on this step up from Web 2 to Web 3. It's something that we've been working on the nonprofit side in eToro for a while. So we've established the Good Dollar, which is a universal basic income project on the blockchain, where we have now 300,000 people more than 300,000 people who open wallets, more than 60,000 people every day who collect good dollars for free to basically get educated and included within the digital economy. So our approach into Web3 was, let's start it from a philanthropic, from a nonprofit point of view, to see how people transition. It has become one of the most popular DeFi sort of apps out there. And I think for us, that jump on how do we bridge between CeFi and DeFi? How do we help our customers? And are those the same customers who want to make sure that we custody their assets properly, that we make sure that they're safe, that they're regulated? Are those the same customers who want to jump into the Web3 and sort of take ownership of their own keys, of their own coins, and explore Web3 in a more open way? So I think that's a very exciting transition for us to look at how do we connect the dots between CeFi and crypto, which we've done because we came from the stock and capital markets world into crypto and now sort of into Web3 and DeFi. And how can we connect, because the brand of eToro has always been about simplifying trading and investing, and simplifying access is also about connecting eventually brands. How can we help brands and simplify their experience into basically the hands of our consumers? Because we have 27 million registered users on eToro, and we eventually want to help brands understand what products can they make that are potentially investable grade products that could be in the hands of eToro users.
Well, thank you so much. We're sort of coming up to a close, and I just want to say it's been such a pleasure, and we really value your time. I know it's really early where you're at the moment, and I'm sure you've got kids and what have you getting ready for school.
Surprisingly, they were quiet enough. I heard they opened the door, came in, explored, and went away. Thank you very much. I appreciate it, Michele.
It's been such a pleasure. We'll catch you soon.
Thank you very much. Have a great